Welcome back to CBS Mornings Plus. There may be a 20-point peace plan for Gaza, but there is an overwhelming number of questions about what the future of Gaza will look like and how peace can endure. President Trump has proposed a so-called Board of Peace to temporarily oversee Gaza, but it's still unclear who would be on the board and what exactly the board would do. By the way, former British Prime Minister Tony Blair was suggested for a leading role, but now that's in doubt. One thing is clear, though. We know President Trump says he will chair the board. So could this concept be a viable path forward for the region? Joining us now to discuss is political scientist Khaled Elgindy, a visiting scholar at Georgetown University Center for Contemporary Arab Studies. Khaled, thank you so much for joining us. Talk to us about the little we do know about this board, and could this be a way to move forward, and what needs to be addressed in the short term, the coming weeks, to try to have stability in the region?
Yeah, we don't know a lot about the board. It is at this point just an idea. There are some diagrams in some of the literature trying to explain the structure of this ruling body. But I think what is more important and very often overlooked is whatever its structure, whatever its composition, it is made up entirely of foreigners and headed by the President of the United States. And that's something that, as opposed to Palestinians. So that is the opposite of self-determination. That's not something that is going to go over well with the Palestinian public in Gaza or, frankly, anywhere. And so, there is a Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, but I think if we're looking at a governing body that doesn't include Palestinians, and then in which case it doesn't represent Palestinian interests, that's going to be very problematic.
So, Professor, you mentioned the Palestinian Authority. Having spent some time covering the region from the West Bank, it was remarkable to me that during the period of this war, during those 2 years, the Palestinian Authority was able to maintain some semblance of order in the West Bank. Why would they not be a viable alternative to Hamas in governing Gaza? Because it's really hard to understand how you could have a peace board without the Palestinians involved. I understand the criticisms of the Palestinian Authority, the corruption, but would they not be a good viable choice?
Well, the problem with the Palestinian Authority, in addition to corruption, is that it lacks legitimacy. The majority of Palestinians, and we've seen poll after poll over the last several years, but particularly in the last 2 years, do not want to see President Mahmoud Abbas remain in his position. The overwhelming majority want him to resign. There is widespread dissatisfaction with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, not only because of corruption and fecklessness, but also because it is now perceived overwhelmingly by Palestinians as Israel's security subcontractor, as opposed to, a body that governs and serves the people, the Palestinian people. So there's a credibility problem, there's a legitimacy problem, and so exporting that with all of those problems to Gaza, which has infinitely more problems, is I think going to be problematic.
Khaled, our colleague Tony Dokoupil is in Tel Aviv, and he interviewed Benjamin Netanyahu and asked him about the two-state solution and a possible path forward. And Netanyahu said this.
The Palestinians should have all the powers in a peaceful day to govern themselves, but they can't have the powers to threaten our survival. That sovereign power of security must remain with Israel, because otherwise the jihadists take over.
Khaled, what does that scenario that the Prime Minister is proposing mean for Palestinian self-determination?
It is the exact antithesis of self-determination for Palestinians. What he's talking about is permanent Israeli occupation, which is highly unequal. Palestinians have no rights. They're subjected to military rule. And that's a system that experts call apartheid. I would just remind people also that Prime Minister Netanyahu heads the most extreme government in Israel's history, and in fact has an arrest warrant issued in his name by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity. So what he says about Palestinians, I think, reflects the sort of extremist nature of his government. But it is a denial of Palestinian. The problem, the most destabilizing force in this whole equation is Israel's continued occupation and rule over millions of people with no rights. That is the problem. And until that is addressed, until Palestinians are free and can remain and live as free people in their own land, then you're going to have indefinite conflict and turmoil.
Professor Khaled Elgindy, thank you very, very much for your perspective. We appreciate it on today's By the Way. Thank you.